Start by pouring 300 milliliters of room temperature water into a large mixing bowl and add a 3/4 tablespoon of dry yeast and 1 tablespoon of salt. Give it a little mix and add 500 grams of pizza flour. Ideally, use a highly refined Italian type double wheat flour, but if that's not available in your local grocery store, a close substitute is bread flour. I usually start mixing the dough with a wooden spatula until it no longer works before moving on to working the dough with my hands. When the dough comes together to form a ball, I remove it from the bowl and start kneading it on a work surface with a folding and pushing motion using the palm of my hand. It takes about 10 minutes of kneading before enough gluten is formed. If the dough breaks apart easily when stretched, it means that it is not ready and more kneading is required. I know the dough is ready once it shows elasticity when stretched. Then I roll it into a ball and put it back inside the large mixing bowl for its first proof. Cover the bowl to prevent the dough from drying out. After an hour, the dough would have doubled in size. Remove it from the large bowl onto a work surface and divide the dough into 3 pieces. For a dough of this size, each piece is about 270 grams. I roll them into balls and put each ball separately into smaller bowls and cover the bowls individually with a plate so they are stackable. I leave them to proof at room temperature for an hour before moving them into the chiller where they can stay for up to 5 days. When it's pizza time, turn on the oven to the broiler setting with circulation. If your oven doesn't have the circulation with the broiler setting, don't worry about it, but just crank up the temperature to the maximum. Move the oven rack to a higher shelf so it's close to the ultra hot heating element on the roof of the oven. Remove the pizza dough from the chiller and use a rubber spatula to scrape the dough out of the bowl onto a large non-stick skillet. The skillet does not need to be heated. I always start with the dough falling closer to one side of the skillet so when the whole dough is finally out of the bowl, it lands nicely in the middle of the skillet. Sprinkle some flour over the top and I start pushing the dough with my fingers, starting from the middle and moving towards the edges, taking care not to deflate the edges of the dough. I'll speed this up slightly so you can see as I stretch the dough out until it covers the entirety of the skillet. The bottom of the dough will stick to the skillet and that's perfectly fine at this stage. Then use a spoon to spread a thin layer of tomato sauce over the dough. Ideally, I would use San Marzano tomatoes as that is the authentic tomato variety used in Neapolitan pizzas. I only use the whole tomatoes and not the liquid because the tomatoes are nice and sweet but the liquid may be a bit bitter. Then I add salt and a tablespoon of olive oil. My preference is 1.2 grams of salt to the weight of the tomatoes, and in this case, where the tomatoes weigh about 260 grams, I added about 3.1 grams of salt. Then mix well with an immersion blender. After spreading the sauce on the dough, put the skillet on the stove and turn on to the highest heat. While the skillet is heating up, I use this time to top it with some salami and fresh mozzarella. Salami is not authentic to Neapolitan pizza, but I like it in my pizza so I'm adding it here. As for the cheese, fresh mozzarella made either from the milk of cows or water buffaloes are authentic to Neapolitan pizzas, not the dry mozzarella that occasionally comes shredded. But because the fresh mozzarella has a much higher moisture content, I don't cover the whole pizza with it, otherwise it will look like a swimming pool after it melts. Once the skillet is hot, it will start to cook the dough from the bottom, mimicking a hot stone in a pizza oven. Soon, the edges of the dough will start to puff up and the sauce will start to sizzle. I'm speeding up the video here so you can see that happening. After about 3 to 4 minutes, the bottom of the dough will start to crust up and I use a thin spatula to free the pizza from the skillet. If it does not lift off the skillet on the first try, I make it a point to insert the spatula the next time at the exact same part because this action deflates the edges of the dough slightly, and I want to keep it to only one section while the rest of the edge stays nice and airy. Once the pizza lifts off the skillet, I turn off the heat and using the spatula, I slowly transfer the pizza directly onto the oven rack. Most home ovens do not broil evenly, so I turn the pizza about once every minute to even out the browning and the cooking. After about 3 minutes, the crust would have charred nicely and the pizza can be removed from the oven. As I cut a slice, you can see that the crust has not only charred but also bubbled nicely, forming large air bubbles that are typical of Neapolitan pizzas. You can watch this video over here for another gourmet Italian recipe that you can cook at home. Till next time folks, cheers!